Outstanding. China's Belt and Road Initiative, strategic and economic implications. As Salil said, I'm Professor Emeritus, not Emeritus, that's an airline, at the University of Greenwich. Well, the term roads, of course, is a throwback to the famous Silk Roads, or Silk Routes, as some historians prefer to call them, of history, linking the Roman Empire with ancient China. The Greek for China is seres, which means silk. But it wasn't just silk that came down these routes. They weren't continuous roads. There were various changeover points and middlemen. It was also gunpowder. And in a dark mirror of our own time, of course, Yersinia pestis, the Black Death, which, unlike COVID, wasn't a virus; it was a bacterium, and that took out perhaps a third of the population of Europe in the 14th century. In 2013, the Chinese president Xi Jinping launched the Belt and Road Initiative. Initially, it was called One Belt, One Road. In 2016, the Chinese, in their English translation, renamed it the Belt and Road Initiative, partly, I think, because there were actually two roads. The second road coming up was the Northern Sea route round the top of Russia, the so-called Northeast Passage, and the Northern Sea route is an official Russian term which has been around since the 1930s, but it's not just the bit past Russia, it's going all the way down to the North Sea. So the original name was and remains the official name, Silk Road Economic Belt and 21st Century Maritime Silk Road Development Strategy. You can see it there in Chinese as well. It's slightly confusing because for their own consumption, the Chinese use the original One Belt, One Road, but it's been Belt and Road, i.e. two roads, initiative since 2016, permitting the official incorporation of the Northern Sea route into the initiative in 2018. So that's the chronology of it. Now, I did talk about this at a conference last year, but since then a lot has happened, and we are also about to bring out a book called The Belt and Road Initiative, China's Global Business Footprint. So it's coming out on the 28th of June. So I'm sure you'll be rushing out to bookshops to buy it. Or I'm sure you can get it from Polash as well. It'll be available both as a hard copy paperback and online. In case you wonder what the peculiar thing on the black circle is under the dragon's tail, it is China's new space station. The core module was sent up in April, and the first resupply module went up in May. So it's brand new, and after another 9 trips, it'll be in business. That's the dragon's tail also goes across the pole, and that represents the Northern Sea route. And oh yeah, let's put the satellite into orbit. There we go. That's what it's going to look like. Tiangong, Heavenly Palace. Isn't that wonderful? It's smaller than the National Space Station, but will give China her own permanent presence in space. And the fact that it has a space capability will no doubt affect the digital aspects of the Silk Road, Belt and Road, with the so-called digital Silk Road. So ironically, the post-2013 Silk Roads are maritime, and the belt is a belt of interlinked countries more than 60 now, stretching across Eurasia and indeed into Africa. And so far, 136 countries, 30 international organizations have signed BRI cooperation documents and received $90 billion in Chinese foreign direct investment and exchanged $6 trillion worth of goods in trade with China. So when President Xi Jinping said it was the project of the century, I don't think he was exaggerating. It is a massive initiative and has profound implications, both on land and at sea. I'll do the belt first. As I say, it's like a belt made of interlinked plates. And it's got 6 corridors, the China, Mongolia, Russia economic corridor, the new Eurasia land bridge, the China, Central Asia, West Asia economic corridor, the Bangladesh, China, Myanmar, India, Myanmar economic corridor, and the China, Pakistan economic corridor, and not to forget, of course, the China, Indochina Peninsula economic corridor. So 6 corridors making up the belt. And the investment is in excess, that China has invested in these countries is in excess of $1 trillion. So if I may move now to the 21st century maritime Silk Road, the one to the south, it grew on the so-called string of pearls in the Indian Ocean. So we move from Guangzhou to Haikou, then we go through the South China Sea, up through the Straits of Malacca, to link up with the Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar economic corridor, round Sri Lanka and India to Gwadar in Pakistan, to link up with the China-Pakistan economic corridor, and then on to Mombasa in Africa, around the Horn of Africa to Djibouti, up through the Red Sea and the Suez Canal and into the Mediterranean. It doesn't finish at Piraeus, but Piraeus in Greece is very important because China now owns 50% of the shares in Piraeus. It is a huge Chinese investment, mainly by COSCO, the China Shipping Corporation. And it does go on to link with Venice. However, there are problems with this route. There are several problems, and I'm going to focus on these in the rest of my talk. The first problem is that, well, on the 23rd of March, a 200,000 ton carrier, the Ever Given, carrying 20,000 20-foot equivalent units, or TEUs, which is just standard maritime container. It's 400 meters long, so it's Suezmax size. It is the largest ship that's allowed to go through the Suez Canal. Anything bigger than that has to go around the Cape. But unfortunately, the Suez Canal isn't big enough to cope with it if it turns to one side and runs aground, as you can see happened here. Here is a map showing the, you see it's from a Russian satellite. They're very good at space, the Russians as well. And you can see on the right a focus on the bit of the canal above the North Pointer, and a close-up of it in the corner above there. That's homing in on the stuck container ship. And the result of this, you can just see the container ship in the Ever Given in the extreme top left-hand corner, and you can look at all the ships that are queuing up in the Red Sea waiting to go through. The Suez Canal blockage cost 12% of global trade goes through the Suez Canal every day. So it was holding up trade valued at $9 billion a day, according to data from Lloyd's List, the excellent maritime newspaper. And that's equivalent to $400 million worth of trade per hour. And it was, the canal was blocked for nearly a week. It's been blocked 4 other times in its 150-year existence. The longest after the Six-Day War, when lots of ships were stranded in the Great Bitter Lake. So there are great attractions for China to look at the other route, the Arctic route, which has become more and more feasible as the Arctic ice melts. That's bad news, very bad news for polar bears, but it will open up more and more the route around the north of Russia. I'm sorry, Rotterdam seems to have got into the wrong place on this map, so I'm sorry about that. I won't adjust it now. Anyway, you can see here, this is the Arctic sea ice, and by 2040, it's estimated that that will have melted almost completely. So instead of having to hug the North Russian coast, as you do at the moment, and of course the Russians charge for this service, you'll be able to go straight across the top of the pole. However, there have been other problems. As a study by the Chatham House, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, recently observed, there were plans for pipelines and a port in Pakistan. Well, they may be on hold, but that's gone ahead. Bridges in Bangladesh and railways to Russia, all with the aim of creating what China calls a modern Silk Road trading route to kickstart a new era of globalization. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic has significantly impacted China's ability, Chatham House assesses, and willingness to continue to pour financial resources into high-tech infrastructure projects. Chatham House's work assesses China's foreign economic engagement, as well as analyzes how these initiatives will be impacted by greater geopolitical competition and economic recovery post-COVID-19. I think that's right. Although the pandemic will not end globalization, it's certainly given it a bit of a knock. And prolonged lockdown and economic slowdown mean that the pace and scope of maritime Silk Roads activities will be affected both in the short and long term. It is anticipated that in the short run, BRI projects, Belt and Road Initiative projects, will move at a snail's pace, but that in the mid to long term, BRI projects will pick up again. I think that's almost certainly right. Critics of the Belt and Road Initiative also accuse China of pursuing a policy of debt-trapped diplomacy, luring developing countries into taking out loans from China, of course, to pursue infrastructure projects so that in extremis, when those countries default, it can seize those assets to extend its diplomatic and military reach. Chatham House assesses that evidence to support that view is limited. But we know that of all the countries along the belt, probably the strongest to try to avoid falling into that trap is Myanmar, and a railway project which was intended part of the Belt and Road Initiative, for example, was cancelled in 2014 because Myanmar was reluctant to get into debt for that. So here's our 21st century maritime Silk Road again. And the first place coming out of China or before going into China is the South China Sea. Now, here we have a problem. From about 2014, the Chinese came up with a very ingenious stratagem. There are lots of reefs and shoals barely above the sea and uninhabited in the South China Sea, and that's Fiery Cross Reef in 2006. It's probably a sort of nice place perhaps to get stranded until you get picked up. But by 2015, it looked like that, with runways, fortifications, various facilities, and you can see a harbour dug out, a huge investment. And obviously, the Washington Post came up with the rather amusing title, Great Wall of Sand. Well, it's not just a Great Wall of Sand, it's a Great Wall of Sand and a lot of concrete. The latest event to bring that all up to date was on the 6th of, April 2021, when China parked a number of maritime militia vessels off Whitsun Reef. And this upset the Philippines very much. There are the maritime militia vessels, and you can see what may be a People's Liberation Army Navy, a Chinese Navy vessel at the far end. The thing is that since before the 1949 victory in the Chinese Civil War, China has claimed something known as the 9-dash line, and you can see the 9 dashes there quite clearly. This conflicts with the rights of neighboring countries under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea of 1982, which allows you up to 200 nautical miles of exclusive economic zone. So you have the rights to the fish and the seabed resources as well, and of course mineral resources under the seabed under that law. You can go further out, up to 350 nautical miles, if you have continental shelf extending out there and there's nobody else in the way. And in fact, the Russians have tried to claim the North Pole using that piece of legislation. So you can see that the Spratly Islands are disputed with the Philippines, and the Paracel Islands are disputed with Vietnam. So the Chinese solution to this is to start building fortifications on every atoll and shoal that it can. And the thing is that you are entitled to claim territorial sea up to 12 miles off your baseline, off your territory, and 200 miles of exclusive economic zone. So that gives would give China control. Of course, the international court hasn't approved this, but that would give China control, certainly de facto control, of the whole of the South China Sea. There's Whitsun Reef, which is where this latest incident took place. Whitsun Reef lies about 175 miles off the Philippine coast from Palawan, and that is well within the Philippines EEZ. The Southern Maritime Silk Road interlinks with the Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar economic corridor, and you see its main terminus is Calcutta, but you can see that, and the Brazil, China, India, Myanmar economic corridor, there are pipelines going out towards a new deep sea port at Kiao Phu. So those are the new pipelines from the facility at Shui off the Myanmar coast. And that would enable oil and gas to be pumped directly from the sea straight through to Kunming and Nanjing in China. Trouble is, there's another strategic problem here, is that it runs straight through bits of Myanmar where there have long-standing conflicts. And you can see here about 40 Myanmar army battalions. They're not as big as our battalions, because the British Army's got about 40 as well, but a huge presence. And you can see the grey area is the area where there have been armed battles since 2011. So it runs through a disputed area, and at its far end, at its seaward end, as you can see there, on its way to Kiao Phu, the terminus, you have the Rohingya people who have been the subject of persecution by the Myanmar government, and about 600,000 of whom have gone for refuge into Bangladesh. That's more than at any time crossing an international border since Rwanda.
Prof, would you another 1 minute maybe, sir?
Okay.
Thank you.
Finally, Djibouti. China has not previously had military bases abroad, but in 2015 they built their first one. There you see it being opened by the Chinese Navy, who run it. That's the Chinese Navy, very smart. And it's a huge. There are other bases there, including Camp Lemonnier, the American base, and you can see the Chinese have built a huge fortified base there. They've also built a high security compound at Gwadar in Pakistan, and that may be intended to become a naval base as well. Well, from Djibouti, the Chinese have also built a railway to the Ethiopian capital of Addis Ababa, so the Silk Road, the belt or road, extends right into Africa. Here you see investment, 6 main investors in Africa, and the Chinese investment is dark blue, and you can see a very high proportion of it is in the east of Africa, in Ethiopia, the railway, of course, Tanzania, Mozambique, Democratic Republic of Congo, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. And the BRI also is causing problems in India. India is not a signatory to BRI, but BRI is both sides of it, going into Pakistan and going through the Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar economic corridor. So the BRI has exacerbated long-running conflicts, including, of course, the Uyghurs in western China in the belt, and the Rohingya Muslims. India is not part of the BRI, but it could be argued that it should be. And it's a bit like Brexit, you know, there are pro and con people in India. And the COVID-19 pandemic has definitely slowed the progress of the Belt and Road Initiative, but BRI will probably resume in the longer term. Thank you.